the gland situated above the kidney. And this secretes then cortisol. And this corticosteroids, I said that for a short period of time it is alright. But when it is prolonged, the stress is prolonged for a long period of time, and then this prolonged level of corticosteroids and other hormones, norepinephrine, etc., then they give rise to various diseases like hypertension, diabetes, suppressing of the immunity. Cortisol, everybody knows that it is used for suppressing the immunity as well. So all these things then play, you can say, a negative role in the body, which has to be taken into consideration. So even the norepinephrine on the other hand is a catecholamine that functions both as a hormone and neurotransmitter. Norepinephrine is synthesized from dopamine, a neurotransmitter, and released from the adrenal medulla on the blood. In the brain, it is released by noradrenergic neurons and acts as a neurotransmitter in the central and in the sympathetic nervous systems. As a stress hormone, norepinephrine affects those parts of the brain that are responsible for attention and responding to actions. In conjunction with epinephrine, it forms the basis of the fight or flight response, that is the stress response, by directly increasing the heart rate, stimulating the release of glucose from stored energy, and enhancing the supply of blood to skeletal muscles. So these two hormones basically play a part in development of these psychosomatic diseases. In addition to that, studies also link stress to changes in the way blood clots, which increases the risk of heart attack. So by these findings, by these studies, scientists have observed that you can't segregate mind totally from the body. You have to take the mental phenomena, the mind also taken into consideration while considering the so-called purely physical diseases earlier. Now, as I said, they are clubbed as the psychosomatic diseases. Psycho means the mind and soma means the body. So all these diabetes, hypertension, autoimmune diseases, they clubbed as the psychosomatic diseases. Now we come to the next one. What is spirituality? According to the American Academy of Family Physicians, first we consider the spirituality from the medical point of view, what the medical faculty says. Spirituality is the way you find meaning, hope, comfort, and inner peace in your life. Many people find spirituality through religion. Some find it through music, art, or a connection with nature. Others find it in their values and principles. Now this American Academy of Family Physicians is trying to define the spirituality, which many of them may not agree, but they are trying to define. And now the question arises, why the medical faculty, the allopathic faculty is trying to define it? So why is a medical organization like the Academy defining spirituality? What does spirituality have to do with health and health disparities? So there are different studies were made due to which now the questionnaire has begun. So recent medical studies indicate that the people who describe themselves as spiritual exhibit fewer self-destructive behaviors, namely suicide, smoking and drug and alcohol abuse, less stress and a greater total life satisfaction. Spirituality has been shown to reduce depression, improve blood pressure, and improve the immune system. Besides, one study showed that religiously oriented patients were 3 times more likely to survive open heart surgery than those who had no religious ties. Some detailed studies are also there. I read out that one also very important from the medical point of view. Research on the role of spirituality in healthcare. The effect of spirituality on health is an area of active research now, and the studies tend to fall into 3 major areas: mortality, coping, and recovery. Mortality. Some observational studies suggest that people who have regular spiritual practices tend to live longer. Another study points to a possible mechanism, interleukin-6. Increased levels of interleukin-6 are associated with an increased incidence of disease. A research study involving 1,700 older adults showed that those who attended church, temples, etc. were half as likely to have elevated levels of interleukin-6. The authors hypothesized that religious commitment may improve stress control by offering better coping mechanisms, richer social support, and the strength of personal values and worldview. Coping. Patients who are spiritual may utilize their beliefs in coping with illness, pain, and life stresses. Some studies indicate that those who are spiritual tend to have more positive outlook and a better quality of life. For example, patients with advanced cancer who found comforts from their religious and spiritual beliefs were more satisfied with their lives, were happier, and had less pain. Some studies have also looked at the role of spirituality regarding pain. One study showed that spiritual well-being was related to the ability to enjoy life even in the midst of symptoms, including pain. This suggests that spirituality may be an important clinical target. Results of a pain questionnaire distributed by the American Pain Society to hospitalized patients showed that personal prayer was the most commonly used non-drug method of controlling pain. Spiritual beliefs can help patients cope with diseases and face death. When asked what helped them cope with their gynecological cancer, 93% of 108 women cited spiritual beliefs. In addition, 75% of these patients stated that the religion had significant place in their lives, and 49% said they had become more spiritual after their diagnosis. Among 90 HIV positive patients, those who were spiritually active had far less fear of death and less guilt. A random Gallup poll asked people what concerns they would have if they were dying. Their top issues were finding companionship and spiritual comfort, chosen over such things as advanced directives, economics, and financial concerns. So those who were surveyed cited several spiritual reassurances that would give them comfort. The most common spiritual reassurances cited were beliefs that they would be in the loving presence of God or a higher power, that death was not the end but a passage. Recovery. Spiritual commitment tends to enhance recovery from illness and surgery. For example, a study of heart transplant patients showed that those who participated in religious activities and said their beliefs are important, combined better with follow-up treatment, had improved physical functioning at the 12-month follow-up visit, had higher levels of self-esteem, and had less anxiety and fewer health worries. In general, people who don't worry as much tend to have better health outcomes. Maybe spirituality enables people to worry less. The specific spiritual practices have been shown to improve health outcomes. In the 1960s, Benson began research on the effects of spiritual practices on health. Some people who practiced transcendental meditation approached him in the 1960s and asked him to determine if meditation had beneficial health effects. He found that 10 to 20 minutes of meditation twice a day leads to decreased metabolism, decreased heart rate, decreased respiratory rate, and slower brain waves. Further, the practice was beneficial for the treatment of chronic pain, insomnia, anxiety, hostility, depression, premenstrual syndrome, and infertility, and was a useful adjunct to treatment for the patients with cancer or HIV. So these studies, all this indicate that now the scientists, the medical fraternity is also coming with these ideas that spirituality and religious beliefs is definitely playing some part in improving the health of the individual. Now we come to the spiritual point of view. What does spiritualists say about the spirituality? And then we'll come how to develop the spirituality and what is the possible mechanism by which this spirituality can be helpful in developing the health as well as the overall satisfaction of the human being. The first is the spirituality according to the spiritualists. Now this concept of spirituality varies widely with various religions. What we see, if you read various religions, you'll find that there is so much of differences. Even among the same religion, various sects will consider it in a different ways. In the same sects, even you find that there is various difference of opinion among the same individuals, different individuals. So, but what I found the best answer is from the Swami Vivekananda explanation, which is based on Vedanta. And this satisfaction, they have embraced the monasticism with Swami Vivekananda, and the main reason being, and I used to read the books, I found it, the explanation is very scientific and very good, very simple. Two things are major contributors for the Swamiji's teachings. One is the simplicity, and another thing is the scientific basis. So we try to explain what he means by spirituality and how simply, very simple manner he has explained even to the Western audiences. He had once remarked, to put Hindu ideas into English and then make out of dry philosophy and intricate mythology, queer startling psychology, a religion which shall be easy, simple, popular, and at the same time meet the requirements of the highest minds. It is a task which only those can understand who have attempted it. The abstract Advait must become living, poetic, in everyday life. Out of hopelessly intricate mythology must come concrete moral forms, and out of bewildering yogism must come the most scientific and practical psychology. And all this must be put in a form so that a child may grasp it. That is my life's work. So we'll see how Swamiji explains this spirituality by giving a very good example. In the West, when he had gone to America and London, he delivered a series of lectures on Jnana Yoga, which he compiled as a Jnana Yoga. And there he beautifully explains the concept of Atman. The spirituality means, we are basically, Maharaj has already told you, that we are basically the Atman. Atman means which is an entity which is both body and mind. We're going beyond body and mind. And Atman, how? Swamiji explains by giving a beautiful example, simile. Now the example of vision, he says, how we perceive a thing. The rays of light, they come from the object. They first enter the cornea. From cornea, they go to the lens. From lens to the retina. And retina, it gets transformed into electrical energy. It goes to the optic nerve. And means the vision is not ending. Generally people will think, if it is falling in the eye, in the retina, the vision is complete. But as a medical fraternity, everybody knows that it is not the end of the process. The sensation will go from the retina, it will travel like an electrical energy, it will pass to the optic nerve, and then it will go into the brain. And in the brain, as everybody knows, that there are centers of perception. What Swamiji says, that the organs of perception. So medical science says, when these electrical impulses or the senses, they reach these organs of perception or the centers of perception, what the medical science says, then the perception is complete. But here Swamiji argues, Swami Vivekananda, he says the perception is not complete. Why? He gives an example. For example, suppose a person is reading a book, and suppose some noise occurs somewhere, but he will not be able to listen to that sound or noise. Why? Because the mind was not attached to it. Means in addition to the perception of the waves, whatever it is entering, the sound waves are also entering, the vision of the waves are also entering, the sound waves are entering there, but the man is not able to perceive, because the mind was not attached to it. So mind becomes a very important factor. Again he says, it is not the end of the process, the end ultimately, it is taken to the intellect, and even that there the perception does not end. He again gives an example. For example, this light is being, so many things are projected on that screen. Now how do we see that? Suppose a movie is there, or whatever picture is there. Unless that background screen is steady, we are not able to perceive that thing. So that screen has to be something, has to be there in the background, it has to be steady. Otherwise we are not able to perceive that thing. And he says that this steady thing, this background thing, against which we perceive all the other things in the world, this is called as Atman. Unless this Atman is there, this background, this steadiness is not there, we are not able to perceive anything. So he tries to prove the existence of Atman on the basis of this example. But this example is not the end of the process, because it gives an idea. It has to be verified by some means. And ultimately, therefore, Sri Ramakrishna comes and says, what is the proof that this Atman, what we read in the books, and what is the examples, what they are giving, they really exist. And therefore, Swami Sri Ramakrishna says that I have perceived it, I have experienced it. Means this Atman, the verification of the existence of Atman is that by various spiritual practices, briefly I am going to explain those processes, we can experience this Atman, we can verify that really it exists. It is not the example of just giving some example or even hypothetical sense. So this example is very important. Let's simplify it, and how by simply saying that how we can understand this concept of the Atman. Now how this spirituality, how to reach, how to analyze this Atman. In our scriptures, there are 4 principal methods are explained. Now this what we call as yoga, Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga. They are the 4 principal methods by which it is told that we can experience this spirituality, we can experience this Atman and fulfill our life. So yoga means actually that yoga means in addition, like we say 2 plus 2, 2 plus 2 और 2 का योग होता है 4. Yoga means joining something. So yoga means connecting or union or communion with God. And there are 4 ways basically of communion with God. One is Jnana Yoga, that is by the knowledge. The second is the Raja Yoga, that is concentration. And the third is Bhakti, and another is the Karma path. So there are these 4 principal paths by which we can attain the spirituality or the Atman. Now these paths are described in our scriptures depending upon the various temperament of the persons. Where the person may be intellectually inclined, a person may be emotionally inclined, a person may be work-oriented, and a person may be rationalistic. So depending upon all these things, our ancient rishis, they have categorized these 4 basic principles. So narrate about these things. In Jnana Yoga, mainly it is contemplation, that I am Atman. But as you see, to think constantly that we are Atman, just as Swamiji explained, that if you go on constantly thinking, that will help us in overcoming various problems. But even in, you can say, during the Gita time, when Sri Krishna was there, and the Gita was, Bhagavan Sri Krishna explains Gita to Arjuna, and he explains the various methods of attainment. Now to think that when something wrong happens to us, that we are Atman, it becomes really a very difficult affair. Liver side cancer, other kinds of pain. Even slightest disturbance of the mind, if somebody abuses us, somebody says against us anything, we get so much disturbed. So to think of this constantly, that I am Atman and not the body, so it becomes a very difficult process. And even so, the thousands of years ago, even the Sri Krishna says, when Arjuna asks that you are telling so many ways, tell me which is the best path for me. So he tells that, Sri Krishna explains, yes, Jnana is also a path, Bhakti is also a path, and other paths are also there. But Jnana path is a bit difficult, because to think of an embodied being, to constantly think as I am Atman is really difficult. However, it is not impossible. Like Raman Maharshi was one example in the modern times, wherein he utilized exclusively this Jnana Yoga method and reached the spirituality. Otherwise, in all common parlance, it is the combination of various paths which is being used. So even Sri Krishna says generally the Bhakti path is quite easy. And Sri Ramakrishna, when he comes, he also says that today's era, this Bhakti path is quite easy for this Kali Yuga time. The next is the Raja Yoga. In the Raja Yoga, there are 8 steps, what is called as Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan and Samadhi. There are 8 full paths. Now Yama means not hurting others, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence, non-receiving of any gifts. And Niyama means cleanliness, contentment, austerity, study and self-surrender to goal. And then Asana means posture. Pranayama means control of the various energies which is in our body. Pratyahar is taking the mind from the object, away from the object. And Dharana means fixing mind on a spot. And ultimately, and then Dhyana, meditation, which is culminating into Samadhi, that is the super conscious state. Now, by this eightfold path, one thing I would like to tell, this meditation is very much emphasized nowadays. Everywhere you see the yoga and meditation word is used. But if you go through this eightfold, there are 8 steps, we'll find that meditation is the 7th step. And we have to pass through the other 6th step. Unless we pass through the first 6 steps, we will not be able to meditate properly and attain the superconscious state. And that is the reason, because these first 2 steps, yam and niyam, they are concerned basically with the morality, which is most important from the modern point of view. And therefore, Swami Vivekananda specially emphasizes this aspect, yam and niyam, in today's era. We talk about meditation, and then you will ask several people, those who are going, and will think that, you will ask after some time, that due to the distraction, ultimately you have to work. And work has got family, work, so many distractions are there, it becomes difficult to concentrate. And the problem is this only, because our basis foundation like this can be compared to a building where dharana, dhyan and samadhi are the topmost portions of the building. We are aiming for that. But the foundation, which is not seen, which is most important, this is yama and niyam, the moral concept, the moral authority, which is most important, should be given to that, which everybody now we see, because of the degradation of the moral values only, all this Annazari movement, all these movements have come into being. So unless this is emphasized, we make us sure of this moral thing, it will not be possible to attain that meditation superconscious state for, you can say, for a long period of time. That is very important. Now comes the Karma Yoga and the Bhakti Yoga. In Karma Yoga, everybody, now this is also very important, rather the most important. Nobody can stay without work. And so how to work? The Swamiji gives, now there are several, there's a basic principle tenets I will read out. On the basis, Swamiji's principles, how to work in the best possible way to get the best results. So first is, we should bear. Every karma bears fruit as a result. That is very important from the spiritual point of view and the moral point of view. This we don't understand. That every karma has got its effect. It may not be immediate. It will be later on. So if we can imbibe this concept itself, our whole spiritual principle, the Eastern ideas, Buddhistic and Vedantic, are based on these ideas. That the impression, then karmic principles, and the rebirth. All this they have got, every karma will produce some kind of effect. And therefore, everybody must do good karmas only. And this is the reason why this kind of, so much of corruption and other things have come, because we have lost faith in this karmic principles. So for the fundamental thing is this, we must bear in mind, today or tomorrow, that's why the emphasis, so much emphasis is laid on service and other aspects. Go on doing good, do not think of whatever the return. The return will not come immediately. It will come sometime or the other. But the problem is, Swamiji says, we don't have patience to practice it. That is the biggest problem in the life. So we have to develop that patience. So go on doing good to the others, and you will see that someday or the other, it will come in some way or the other around it. So that's why it is said that always you should go on giving, giving and giving. Do good work, charitable work. Second is, all works are equal from spiritual angle. That is another point. It is not that somebody, suppose a scientist or a doctor or some big moneyed persons, they are only from better position from the spiritual angle. Rather, if we see from our scriptures, Mahabharata scriptures, there are beautiful stories, how they say that how a simple householder, and then one Vyad, the butcher, he also attains great spirituality by just turning the attitude, that we should change the attitude, the selfish attitude should be changed Godwards. If that attitude merely is changed, it becomes a yoga. The simple yoga karma, which is just a karma, that becomes a yoga if you change attitude towards God. And therefore, when it becomes a karma yoga, then it will lead to God, it will lead to spiritual development. And this sanskara's impression on mind, it is by work only. I already told. Then another important, work like a master, not as a slave. How? Somebody says that we generally work as a slave. Means for every work we expect something in return. So that becomes, you can say, working like a slavery. So when we work, suppose if you are working honorarily, I have seen. Suppose you are working somewhere, you are getting paid. So the master, where you are employed, he has every authority to scold you, behave in any way you like. But if you are working honorarily, you are not doing anything, he will think 10 times before scolding you or telling you anything. So you are working like a master. So that is the ideal should be like this. That's why the difference between what the Ramakrishna mission monks work. We also work, we also go to the hospital, work for 6 to 7 hours. Everybody has to work. The difference is this, that we have no return, selfish return. When there is selfish return, you get bound, and ultimately it is not a yoga. So when there is no return, then the same work becomes a yoga. That is an important thing. So work with love, expect no return. And as examples, Ramakrishna gives a beautiful example. Work like a housemaid. A housemaid works like that. It does not belong to her. It belongs to somebody else. So there should not be any kind of personal attachment to the work which we are doing. So this non-attachment is also very important. Non-attachment to the fruits of work, then towards work also. So intense work, but without I and mind. That is most important. So all problems come when we consider this ultimately roundabout way, the selfishness. The most unselfishness when we can work only when we develop this kind of spiritual attitude, which is most important. Otherwise, it is very difficult to do unselfish work for a long period of time. For a short period, you can do some charitable work. For 1 hour, you can do some charity or develop unselfishness. But suppose lifelong, like us, you have to do unselfishness, then you have to develop this spiritual attitude. Then only that work becomes yoga, and then it takes us to God. And lastly, we come to the Bhakti Yoga, which is very important from this era. Ramakrishna says that this Bhakti and Karma, these are the simplest way to follow. I said that Dhyana is alright, but Bhakti and Karma, that are the simplest way to follow for leading us to this God realization. And this is first, why? It is a natural way to practice spirituality. Second, how? This love for the sense objects is to be directed to God. In Bhakti Yoga, what is done is, we have got the attachment and love, but for what? For the sense objects. The same sense, the love which we have got for the sense object, Ramakrishna says that you turn that same emotional attitude towards God. Then you develop that faculty will become my yoga. So thing which distracts us, which gives us problem, we'll see that if it is given a Godwardly direction, it will raise us spiritually. And prayer is the most effective way to develop bhakti. It is not so easy to develop bhakti unless we have to go on praying to the God to give us this love for the God, and we'll come to know that ultimately it will give us great peace. So we have come to see that these are the 4 principal paths, but basically it is not exclusively that one is going through one single path. Everybody has to combine all the paths through which he has to go. Now we can see how this various paths spirituality, they develop in the health and other aspects of the development of the human being. And the first of all, we come to the yoga. Yoga we had already talked about. And in this yoga, there are 2 aspects, Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga. Here, to get the maximum benefits of yoga, one has to combine the practices of yogasanas, pranayam and meditation. So generally, yoga, you refer the yoga as some kind of exercises only. But all the 3 factors are to be combined to get the maximum results. These are yogasanas, pranayam and meditation. So how it helps? Regular practice of asanas, pranayam and meditation can help such diverse ailments such as diabetes, blood pressure, digestive disorders, arthritis, arteriosclerosis, chronic fatigue, asthma, varicose veins and heart conditions. Laboratory tests have proved the yogi's increased abilities of consciously controlling autonomic or involuntary functions such as temperature, heartbeat and blood pressure. Research into the effects of yogic practices on HIV is currently underway with promising results. According to medical scientists, yoga therapy is successful because of the balance created in the nervous and endocrine systems, which directly influences all the other systems and organs of the body. Yoga acts both as a curative and preventive therapy. The very essence of yoga lies in attaining mental peace, improved concentration powers, a relaxed state of living, and harmony in relationship. So this is how the yoga helps us in these diseases. And so many diseases are mentioned where this yoga can be beneficial. So there are physiological benefits. Physicians and scientists are developing brand new health benefits of yoga every day. Studies show it can relieve the symptoms of several common and potentially life-threatening illnesses such as arthritis, arteriosclerosis, chronic fatigue, diabetes, AIDS, asthma and obesity. So studies conducted at yoga institutions in India have reported impressive success in improving asthma. So this asthma is their high blood pressure, then pain management, back pain. So many diseases, even physical diseases, can be controlled by the yoga. So apart from these things, and how this spirituality helps in getting benefit. Now, earlier we had considered that stress is a major factor in giving rise to several diseases. And what is ultimately the cause of the stress? The spiritualists, when think over it, Buddha has already said, Swami had given example of Buddha, that it is the unbridled desire, uncontrolled desire. Ultimately, if you go think deeply, you will come to the conclusion that desires are all right, normal desires. But if they go out of the hand, they become uncontrolled. Ultimately, they become stressful. This chronic stress is the basic reason for this is uncontrolled, unbridled desire. So this gives rise to the stress. And here the spirituality, the role of the spirituality comes into play. The spiritual people, they control the mind, they control the desires, which remains, and you can say, a practical level. Ultimately, all these things become a social problem, and all these desires go out of the hand. Every day you go on reading the papers, how so many successful people, like even the Tiger Woods or so many people attain success, Strauss-Kahn and everybody, attaining even the highest level, and they lose this control over their mind. So they go into that, you can say, abyss. So you see, this mind control is so much important. Even if you're reaching such a high state, suddenly when you will go down, you can't say unless the mind is under the control. And here is what the spirituality does. It controls the mind, it makes the one peaceful. I gave the example, the Atman. And Atman is what? That Atman is beyond and mind, and when you attain to that Atman, you become steady, you become peaceful. The mind does not waver. So what happens when you start growing spiritually? Gradually the mind becomes peaceful, it becomes controlled, mind becomes peaceful, and then you will gradually realize that how it is benefiting you. So it will reduce the stresses, and as soon as the stress is reduced, depression, other things, how we see that the psychosomatic diseases which develop as a result of stress and depression, we are benefited by getting rid of those diseases. So this is the way how the spirituality benefits. Another important thing is the moral values. Now, moral values also, the spiritualist, the person who is a spiritually oriented, he can remain moral throughout life. Otherwise, we can see examples of the communists. Those who had got the positive attitudes, communism came in 1916, they had positive attitude towards the life. They wanted to serve the community, they wanted to serve the humanity, and they wanted to have a simple life. But just 7 to 8 years, it collapsed. Because Swamiji was laying always the stress that unless we have got this spiritual foundation, unless we have got some basic foundation, all these other moral values concepts do not last longer. So this spirituality is the basis by which you become study in the moral values as well. We have got a very good example of Swami Janakishananda, how when mind is always controlled, you get an ability to get it distracted from the body. You can say, we said that Atman is beyond body and mind. So he has exemplified in his life. Swami Janakishananda was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. An example comes that he had a carbuncle, he develops a carbuncle on the back. And at that time, the chloroform used to be given for anesthesia if surgery was to be done. So now the chloroform, if you read, that it has got several side effects. So when it was explained to him that chloroform will be given, and it has got several side effects, he says that, I do not need any kind of anesthesia. Give me some time. I will withdraw my mind from the body, and you can operate me without any anesthesia. So Swami Janakishananda goes into deep meditation, withdraws mind from the body, and then operation was done without anesthesia, he gets cured. So all these things are there, say how this spirituality helps in various ways with all the human beings. And in Sri Ramakrishna's case, we see, now and then he used to go in samadhi, used to go into God consciousness. And in Gita, it is all beautifully summed up how to develop the spirituality. It says that by abhyas, constant practice. We see that it is quite difficult. It seems that this developing a spirituality may be very, very difficult. But Sri Krishna says, by constant practice, prayer and regular spiritual disciplines, it is quite possible to lead this spiritual life and attain to the highest goal. Nothing is impossible. And one thing greatly, again, Bhagavan Sri Krishna tells in Gita, Swalpamapasya dharmasya prayate mahato bhayat. The practice of even the slightest of this religion saves us from great fear. That is the great problems of the life. So we get the guidance from all these rishis and munis, how even if you may not be able to develop spiritually very highly, but even this Sri Krishna is telling, even if we start practicing gradually, even at the lowest level, even the slightest practice of this religion, we'll find that our mind is becoming peaceful, steady. Ultimately, what is mind? The stress, etc., is nothing but the agitated mind. Our mind will become peaceful, calmful, and ultimately that everything will be distressed, will be free of stress and depression, and the calm, peaceful, and ultimate goal of the life when this Atman is realized, that what is called as infinite bliss. That they say that why we should go for the Atman realization, and after realizing Atman, only realizing, we get that infinite bliss, unmixed with sorrow. All other happiness what we get is mixed with sorrow and are transient. But in case of this spiritual realization, as you go forward and forward, you see that only the happiness and bliss part will be increasing. The sorrow and the negative factor will go on decreasing and decreasing. And that is the best criteria of development of the spirituality. So in the end, I can conclude that spirituality greatly helps in making an individual and also the whole of the society. If the individual develops, the society will develop, all healthy in all respects. Thank you very much.